Hi guys, this is going to be a quick tutorial on how to export and import data from ServiceTracker and into ServiceTracker using a third-party tool called the Salesforce Inspector. It works off your browser, so what you're going to need to do first of all, open up your Chrome browser, click on the More icon here and go to Extensions and visit the Chrome Web Store. If you just type in Salesforce at the top, then this is going to give you all of the Salesforce plugins for Google Chrome. They're all good. The one we're going to use today is the Salesforce Inspector, which I've already added. So you click on it and you just say Add to Chrome. Follow the wizard and make sure that that's installed, and that should appear in your system tray at the top. You may have to close your browser and reopen it, but ultimately the Salesforce Inspector is what we use to import and export data. In the ServiceTracker system, you will now see a little pop-up on the right hand side, and you click on the arrow and you've got the options to export and import. When you click on export, you come up with this little window here, and this is what we call a query window. And if you know SQL, great. SOQL is the kind of language that we use in Salesforce, and it's just basically Salesforce object query language. And the way it works is you say select something, some kind of field, maybe a name, from some kind of table, and then you could put some where clause in it, and you could just say first name equals Mike, for example. You can double check the fields as well by clicking on them, and it pops up down below with some recommendations. So we know name is real, first name is also real, so we can click on export. Okay, and it says if there's an error, so I'm just going to end that with a quotation, export. So there you go, there's all the contacts in the system with the first name of Mike. Now when you're exporting and you're going to be manipulating data ready to import it back, you will always need the ID field. Okay, so don't worry about the language and things like that. You will get used to it. I have got some queries already which I'm going to be showing throughout the demo, but it's just a way of basically writing a script to get data out of the system. We're going to do an example of how to do inspection items. So we're going to export inspection items, change the ID of the account, and then import those as fresh inspection items on the system. Saves a little bit of time kind of creating inspection items. So if in ServiceTracker you go to an inspection item record, what you'll notice is there's a site, there's things like the reference, sort order, location, unit type, status, default analysis, all of these things. So we're going to export all the fields from a particular account, and we're going to use the Mike's Bikes one. If I click on the Mike's Bikes record, you're going to see in the top here there's an ID, and you'll notice this everywhere in the system, but this is a unique ID for the Mike's Bikes site, and we're going to use that in our query. So I'm going to grab this ID, I'm going to pop it into this query window, and then we're going to get all the inspection items for that particular site. So I just copy that, and then I can paste that into a query I've already created. So as you can see, I've got select, and then all my field names, from, and then the table name, where, and then we're just going to say where the account equals, and pop the ID in, export. I've got too many fields here, so I'm just going to take out the type. And this is basically an export now of all of the inspection items against that site that I picked up from the ID here. So I just do a quick check over first of all. So yeah, I've got the ID, the record type, default analysis, location, reference, inspection interval, but I haven't got the account. So I'm just going to pop in account in there, so I can start typing the word account and then look for it here. Export. And the reason I want that is I'm actually going to change that in Excel and then re-import the data. So I'm happy with the data. I can copy that in Excel format and just basically paste that into an Excel spreadsheet. this is the column that I'm going to be changing. I want to keep everything else, but I just want to make sure that I'm copying this to a brand new account. So in the system, we can find a completely different record. Let's say outdoor adventure. We can take the ID now from the outdoor adventure record, and then we can just paste that into our Excel table. There it is. So I've now just changed the ID. We're not deleting anything, we're not moving anything, we're literally just copying all the records from one table and putting them into another. I can then copy all this data. So let's go to the end here. Copy, and then if I use my little arrow again and I can now say data import, I can just paste this into my data area here. So there's all the data. I'm going to insert. You've also got the ability to update or upsert, which means update and insert if it doesn't exist, or delete. Be very careful with these things. So we're going to insert, and then what we're going to insert is what we call a service item, or better known as an inspection item. So I'm inserting inspection items with this data. Over on the right, I'm going to be doing some field mapping. So I don't need to map the ID because we're going to create some brand new IDs from this data, so I can skip that. I am going to import the account. So there's the account ID, the record type, the type, the default analysis, and all those other fields that I created or exported from the data on the other site. And then I just click import. Okay, it says 595 records will be imported, and then all we got to do is just click import, and that will create 595 records. What I tend to do sometimes is just limit the batch size. So I might just say batch size 1. Threads 1, for example, if I'm importing a lot of data, or you can just take these down, so you can do 10 and maybe a thread of 4, so 4 at a time. And it basically means if there's things running in the background at the same time, it won't interfere with those things. So let's go ahead and import. And off it goes. So as you can see now, it's got a processing part, it's got some in the queue. We've got 80 that have already succeeded, 100, 110. And again, you can start playing around with the batch size as you're importing, just to kind of speed things up. The moment you see some failed or you see some errors, then you can bring the batch size down. This looks like it's going, yep, there's 200 failed. So let's put that batch size back down again and retry. And the reason they fail, it'll tell you on the end. So if there's any errors, it'll say things like unable to lock row, or there's too much going on in the system, please reduce your batch size. So now we're steaming ahead, so we've got all of our records being imported. There you go, all succeeded. And you could, if you wanted to, just copy this and overwrite the data here, which now gives me a brand new ID. Okay, so that's the old ID from the old inspections, and that's the brand new ID which we've got here. So all I'm going to do is refresh. So I can click on Salesforce Home now, go into Outdoor Adventure, and then I just want to check that all these items have been imported into the system. So there's a load of items in here, and you can see more and more and more if you wanted to. You can see inactive inspection items. And if you really wanted to, you could go into the file here, take one of the IDs at random, doesn't matter which one, and you can actually paste that after the first forward slash. And now we're straight into that record that's been imported. You can see there, outdoor adventure, pest and environmental, internal bait box, and we got all the details that we had on the previous ones. You could do that with anything really. And there's another one. So that's how you export and import. There's lots of other things you can do with this. So obviously I'm just picking fields from a specific table with a certain where clause. You could do that for visits, you could do it for accounts, contacts, and this is how we basically manipulate the data very, very quickly. If we wanted to do some mass updates, for example, so we want to see where the type field is blank. So what we could do is we could say where the type is blank. So there's all the records where the type field is blank. There's 374 of them. And we could export that, copy, pop that into Microsoft Excel, and then in our type field we could put in things like EFK unit, or maybe room. And all I'm doing is just updating all the records. Something else. And this time, instead of doing an actual import, I'm going to do an update based on the ID. So I'm going to take all the data, and this time click on my little pop out arrow, import. Instead of inserting a record, I'm going to update a record, and I'm going to update my service item again. Data I've just popped in there now with all that the unit types and types all filled in. The mapping is already kind of done for us because we know the fields are the same, but you can change the mapping if you really wanted to. And then you can just do import, and then that will update all of these items with a record type. You can imagine doing this to close down visits, or maybe update purchase order numbers, or I don't know, change the resource or the owner of a particular site or schedule, whatever. You could do a hell of a lot with it. This is the tool that we use. There are loads of other import and export tools that Salesforce have, but by far this is one of the easiest that we have found. If you've got any questions, please let us know. If you need to know some of the table names and things like that, the inspector is good for this as well. So within the inspection item, for example, we could just go, refresh that a sec. Click inspection items, and instead of doing data import, export and things like that, we just want to show the metadata, for example. And then you can see in the top the name is service item. So the label is inspection item, that's what we know it as, but the actual table name is called service item. And you can see all the different fields and things like that in there. So yeah, have a play around with that. We're on hand if you need us, so just give us a call. We use this pretty much every day. So yeah, if you need help, give us a call. Thanks guys.